Hello and welcome to the CourseMaker podcast. Today, my guest is Michael Pogrebinsky, who's an experienced software engineer and software architect who's worked on cutting-edge solutions and technologies at companies like Google and Intel. Michael is the author of Java multi-threading, concurrency, and performance optimization, as well as a second course, Distributed Systems and Cloud Computing, and a third course on Java reflection. Michael, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
Great to have you here. So yeah, I mean, as I was just describing, you've got three substantial courses out there at the moment, and looking forward to talking about some of those with you. But before we start talking about courses, could you tell listeners a little bit about your technical background? How did you get into software engineering?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always been fascinated with computers, and I think I started programming when I was 15 or maybe sometime in high school. I started with the C programming language. It's still my favorite language. Don't laugh at me. Yeah, lots of segfaults when I was learning it. But yeah, so basically, I really loved it. But I at that point I got really fascinated with robotics. So in college, I decided to major in electrical engineering, and it was a lot of new stuff for me. Later, after maybe a few years just going through the program, I started working part-time at Intel as a computer architecture engineer. And I was really lucky to go to not just any team, but the architecture team, which basically was in charge of developing all the CPU cores, like Intel cores that we use
Wow,
today,
okay.
in your computer, in servers and cloud, and at that time we were actually building the Skylake architecture.
Right.
It was completely fascinating to just see how many super cool tricks and all the things that all these chip manufacturing companies do to speed up our code, and how basically you take all this high level code that we write in Java, C++, and how it's being deconstructed into like the smallest pieces and gets through all the pipeline. So yeah, that was just a great experience. And in particular, I was in charge of performance validation. So that was probably the first point where I got really fascinated with performance, with high performance computing.
Wow. I mean, this is an amazing way to begin a career, right? You really get the deep understanding of the lower level mechanics of how performance works and how to optimize.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was definitely lucky, and it really was a milestone for me. And yeah, the engineers that I worked with were just super smart. And the biggest thing is, at that point, I was still in college, so half of the week I was learning all those theoretical things about what computer architecture looks like and how compilers work and all that stuff. And then the other half of the week, you see how it's actually applied in practice in the industry. So it was definitely great. Yeah. So after that, my first full-time job was at a small company specialized in medical simulation. I was a full stack engineer, but very quickly I found myself being in charge of very critical parts of the code and the entire system that involved video streaming, video capturing, recording, video processing, integrating with different cameras, live feeds. And basically from there on, first of all, I really liked the integration between software and hardware.
Right.
And also writing software that really pushes the hardware that it runs on to the absolute edge of its capacity. After I left that company, I joined a different company that was in the AR space, in the augmented reality. I actually also continued working on video products, but it was completely different ecosystem. It was Android and embedded Linux. I built video solutions for them. I built drivers for them. Again, very kind of software that really takes the hardware to its complete limits. And after that experience, I kind of wanted to shift gears a little bit. And I went into ad tech. So I joined a different company that ran its own data centers, ran like really high scale distributed systems in the ad tech space. And I was really lucky to be involved in a team that was kind of a victims of their own success. They were so successful that performance really became their bottleneck. So
Okay.
yeah, again, I basically worked a lot on concurrency, on distributed systems, on high performance, and yeah, I've stayed in ad tech since then. It's a really fascinating field, but this is basically how I got into performance, distributed systems, and Java in general.
Fantastic. I mean, there's a lot of great experience there that you've been describing, and it's certainly, looking at the courses you've created, I can see how you're bringing a huge amount of very relevant experience to things like performance optimization. So when did you decide to go from doing things in your real life job to deciding, oh, maybe I'll teach some of this stuff? What was that process like?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So there are basically two reasons that kind of trigger that. So first of all, I always loved teaching and sharing my knowledge. Even in high school, I was teaching on the side. I was teaching robotics, math, English. And during my career, I really enjoyed when other engineers came to me for help and advice, and I could really share some of my knowledge with them and teach them something they didn't know. The second, maybe biggest reason is the impact that I wanted to make. So I think all of us, in the end of the day, one of the big reasons we go into this profession is we want to make positive impact on people's lives. We really want to build products that help people. And while doing that in your full-time job for a company, you definitely, and I personally felt that I made a lot of positive impact on a lot of people and users who use the products that the companies I worked for created. But in the end of the day, it felt at times that the impact is somewhat limited to what users the company caters for or what kind of products you get to work on.
Yeah, it's
Um,
definitely a little different, isn't it?
yeah, and it felt sometimes like it was kind of limiting what I can do with the knowledge and the skills and experience that I've already gained over so many years. So I realized that I can teach my skills and all my knowledge to thousands of other engineers, and they can go and build products for their company. And then you get basically you multiply your impact. Like all those engineers can go and build thousands of products now that can impact so many lives. So I guess my passion for teaching and also the will to make a greater impact kind of came to me one day, and I decided to create my first course.
That's really cool. Yeah, and looking at your courses, I mean, there are some it's kind of tough topics here to teach, right? I mean, if we take by way of example something like distributed systems, there are loads of different architectural considerations, different technologies, algorithms. How did you go about deciding what to teach and how to kind of structure something that's potentially like a very complex topic?
Right, and that course was actually pretty challenging because it's a huge topic. There's so much to it, and you can really spend all your life. There are people who actually spend all their life just in the distributed system space. My focus was on two things that kind of maybe defines my general teaching approach. Is I focus first of all on fundamentals. So I like to think of it as, I teach people how to drive a car, and instead of teaching them what those different buttons do and memorize all those things, and then when they get into a new car, they don't know what to do.
Oh, I like
If you
that
know,
analogy. Yeah.
yeah, if you learn how to drive a car, then you can rent or get into anyone's car and you know what to do. So the fundamentals is the most important thing for me. Before we write any line of code at any of my courses, I always talk about why we're doing what we're doing and um, what exactly we're trying to solve here, and what is the general philosophy. And if you have the fundamentals, you don't need to memorize anything. So in the distributed systems and cloud computing with Java course, I cover many topics. Each topic starts with the fundamentals and then goes into a practical application. And that brings me to the second part that I think defines my teaching approach is basically I cater my courses towards engineers. And all my courses are practical. So once you have the fundamentals, you learn how to apply it and apply it into real life examples. And specifically in the distributed systems and cloud computing course, I chose out of many, many topics, I chose the ones that are the most relevant, the most important topics that an engineer needs to know, not just in general for conversation sake, but to actually be successful in interviews, but also in real life. Like you can come to a company and explore what they have, and you understand the system, and you can also improve it. You have the knowledge and the skills to improve upon any system that you're working with.
Makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting how you say, the things that will really actually make an impact on a company as opposed to just being something to talk about, right? Because sometimes people are sort of accumulating esoteric knowledge without necessarily having a good reason to apply it in their day-to-day work. When you look at students who take your courses and really excel, what sort of things do they do differently? How do they approach what can be like really challenging material?
Right. Yeah, that's an excellent question. I wish I could talk to my students, every single student before they start my course, to share that knowledge. The students that I see that are the most successful in my courses, they really focus on the big picture and don't get carried away with details. Details are important. I'm not saying that they're not, but when you're learning at course like distributed systems, you need to understand that you're working with a big system of many components that have to come together and work and make the user feel like they just communicate with just a single computer somewhere on the internet. And if you think about the big picture and how you connect all the components so they would scale and not lose data and be available, then you have the potential to grow your skill set much better than if you're focusing on particular details like, oh, what Java function should I use? Or what's the detail of this API or this configuration?
Yep.
The second thing that I see with successful students, they apply their knowledge. So they don't just watch my video courses like an entertaining YouTube video or like a series on HBO, but they watch it and they apply it and they try it and they maybe run into issues and they ask questions and they try different things. And this is basically the best way to learn engineering, is to apply it practically. So those type of students always succeed in my course.
100% agree. I think, that's a really nice note to kind of wrap things up on, actually. What's next for you, Michael? What have you got planned?
I am in constant communication with my students. I really want to know always what they want to learn, because I'm teaching for them. I'm not teaching just for myself. A lot of students just message me and tell me, hey, this is something that I struggle with. This is something I would like to learn. So I gather a lot of this data, and hopefully soon I'll be able to create more courses that will help a lot of students.
Is it still a little bit secret, or are there any particular topics that you're considering doing more courses on?
I wouldn't go into specifics because I simply haven't decided yet.
Right.
But I generally try to teach topics that are a little more advanced. And to clarify, you don't need to be an advanced engineer to take my courses, but the topics are a little more advanced than an average course on, introduction to Java or web development or stuff like that. So it's definitely something that I personally also enjoy teaching, but also I think there's a bigger gap in both in online courses in general and on the internet. Once you become more experienced, it's so much harder for you to take that next step in your career because there is just so much less knowledge and information
It's
on the
super true.
internet.
Yeah, you're creating a lot more value by going after these sort of advanced topics. Because I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of people who could teach a intro to Java course, but you've got this really unique set of experiences to create your courses. So really interesting to learn about your background there. Where can students go to find out about you and your courses?
Sure. So I have my own website now. It's called prodeveloperacademy.com. So Pro Developer Academy, one word, and you can find my courses. You can find some of my articles, and hopefully I'll be able to create more content and share it on the website. And if you're active on Udemy, you can find my courses there as well. You can just look up my name and find my courses.
Perfect. I'll make sure that all of these websites and references are in the show notes. Michael, thanks very much for doing this. It was great to chat to you.
Yeah, thank you so much.